welcome to the Agricultural Engineering Podcast. This podcast covers all aspects of agricultural engineering. It is produced by the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers. The series of episodes that will be brought to you has been funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. We encourage you to tune in and explore the exciting world of agricultural engineering with us. My name is Maharaj, and I'm your host for today's episode. Hi, and welcome to the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineering podcast. It's really good to meet you. But maybe before we start, could you please give us a brief introduction about who you are, and then we can get going into the interesting questions.
Thank you for having me. My name is David Moore. I'm based in Ireland. I grew up in Ireland, but I currently work in Ethiopia. We're launching FarmLab Ethiopia, a one-stop shop for mechanization for smallholder farmers.
Okay, that's interesting. So mechanizing smallholder farmers is something that I'm quite interested in because I know that smallholder farmers have a lot of challenges, be it money or access to power or energy, and sometimes even the terrain that they work on is not really ideal. So could you please elaborate a little bit about the type of machines that you're looking at using to equip smallholder farmers with?
Yeah. So I've been working in Ethiopia for 11 years. I've seen so many different projects where people have brought in big equipment from the US and from Europe, and it doesn't work, it fails. There's so many failed projects. But if you look at India has scaled mechanization to lots, nearly like 50% of its 120 million smallholder farmers. They have 1 hectare farm, same as Africa, and similar in terms of education, everything. So India is more of a reflection of Africa than the US or Europe is. So we're looking to bring in 50 horsepower tractors and matching implements from India that are affordable, appropriate. And if you're doing the smallholder model, it's a service model, it's a hub. So the farmer doesn't need to own the equipment. The farmer needs the utility of planting the seed or spraying the crop. They don't need to own it. A, they don't have the training to operate it, and B, the cost is shared amongst multiple farmers. So based on the Indian model, one set of equipment, so a tractor and the implements and everything, could do 100 hectares, maybe up to 120 hectares per set, basically. Like an Indian tractor, 50 horsepower, costs $12,000. All the different implements, a planter is only $3,000. So when you look at all of that, maybe you're looking at $50,000 for a full set that can service 100 hectares of farming. And then if you depreciate that over a number of years, it's only $10 or $20 per hectare in terms of charge. So now you can charge farmers $40 or $50 a hectare for the service fee. Use less inputs. The farmer gets a benefit to get higher yields, and it's a profitable business. That's the way it works in India, and we're looking to test it and pilot it in Ethiopia. So we brought the equipment from India together with an Italian app called X-Farm. It's a full farm management system that has telematics on the tractor. All of our implements have a unique Bluetooth device, so we know where all the implements are, how many hours have been used, which farms, and it's a whole integrated approach. We have an app from a Ugandan company called Local Links that the farmer will use to book the services like the Uber or Hello Tractor. So we have a farmer platform, we have the back-end platform through X-Farm, and we have all of the hardware. And then the goal is to bring it all together with Indian farming practice. So it's regenerative agriculture. We're not ploughing the fields. We're planting the wheat directly into the soil. With the planter, the same with the maize. So it's not just the equipment, it's the farming practices as well. There is no conservation or regenerative agriculture, no-till in Africa, particularly in Ethiopia. They plough, and they want to plough. They have centuries of ploughing. So this is a change of mindset that we have to do. So seeing is believing. We have to show farmers the Indian way and show them the regenerative agriculture that's a benefit to them. So we've partnered with Hawassa University in southern Ethiopia. They have land on the campus. We've been doing demonstrations. So we brought people from India, also from Italy, to set everything up. And we planted wheat, maize, soybean, and we've been demonstrating the benefits of the full system on the campus. We'll harvest the crops in the next few weeks, and then we will do a pilot outside of the university. Now that we've developed the system, our team has been trained, we understand everything, with maybe 50 hectares, 60 hectares of farmers using the equipment to show it working in a real life setting. And then the goal is to scale it up to a full hub. Now, a full hub will have anywhere between 12 to 15 tractors, 120 implements, 60 to 70 people, and service farmers in a 5 kilometer radius.
Wow, that's a really interesting model, David, especially when you talk about getting tractors to a level of something similar to Uber. I think that's definitely what we need in Africa because, like you said, it's not everybody that can afford these expensive machines and implements, but they actually need it, even if they can't afford it. And the really good part about the model that you're looking at is that you've mentioned sustainability and regenerative agriculture and conservation agriculture. So it's not just mechanization alone, because there are a lot of people that don't realize that if they take care of the soil, they attract biodiversity, take care of the soil microbes, they actually end up getting better quality produce. And at the end of the day, it's going to put more money into their pockets and everybody's going to be eating healthier food. So it's a win-win situation. So just a random question about the logistics of the operation. So in the areas that you work in, are there proper roads and will it be easy to get these implements to and from the different farmers?
Yes, in the area that we've selected in Hawassa, there's a large city of 1 million people. It's based on Lake Hawassa. There's a fully paved road going around. There's an airport on the opposite side of the lake. So there's a proper road infrastructure going around the whole lake and towards the city. And that's why we've made it easier for ourselves for the first one to make it easy to start the testing and demonstrate rather than having obviously issues of road infrastructure. And just going back to your point about soil, I'm like a soil advocate. I'm telling people all the time, like the soil is the most important. And I'll give you a funny story. I was doing a demonstration with some farmers in Ethiopia, and the soil on the farmer's field was like concrete. There was no organic matter whatsoever in the soil because they've ploughed it. They've been basically mining nutrients from the soil for the last few years. They haven't been putting nutrients back in, basically. And the soil was so hard. And then, they don't get rain. The soil turns to more or less concrete. Yeah. And I was telling the farmer, look, the soil is you need to love the soil. You need to treat it like your wife and look after it. He says, well, I've got 5 wives. And I said, well, now you have 6. So you need to make sure the soil, and that's the key. It's educating the people that is the key. So it's not just technology. It's education. It's a change of mindset. Yeah. And that's why, maybe working with the younger people who don't have that baggage, basically, and you can educate them on that soil health and a different way of farming, and that they're not going to farm the same way as their parents will farm, basically.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially when you talk about the soil. And I'm sure you're aware of the term called agroecology, but in essence, how it started out was that people wanted to reverse the green revolution. And it brings me back to an interesting article about where people at one point thought that they could create soil in a lab. And they just looked at soil as a tool, but not the living organism that it is. So I like that you actually see soil as the living organism, and that you understand that if you take care of your soil, you're going to get better returns, better water use efficiency, better crops, and better quality at the end of the day. So it's a really good way to look at it, especially in Africa, because people may not know that everything comes from the soil and is linked back to their pocket because of the traditional practices that are generally employed. And as you said, you see soil that's as hard as concrete in some places. And if you do have access to a plow, people will want to plow because that's what was done and they think that's what needs to be done. And at the end of the day, you see all of the topsoil just blowing away into the wind and becoming dust.
And I mean, the soil is there life. I mean, they should be, increasing the soil health. That should be their whole focus. And that's what, if you're a farmer and you want to, give to your next generation of your family is a soil with good, soil health, good organic matter and good carbon, and that's the key. And that's saying, look, for your next generation is you have to improve the soil and leave it better than the previous, generation left it to you, basically.
I think if everyone can look at that and think in that way, it would definitely be the ideal situation, David.
Yeah. And then, you talk about agroecology. I mean, there's lots of people in terms of using different buzzwords, but that needs to be the way to go back. We talked, people moved away from that to, conventional farming methods and applying nitrogen, applying all of these things. And yet, the simple methods are what we need, but it's how do you scale them? How do you sort of turn them into something that can be done? Agroecology it's knowledge intensive. Yeah. Not every farmer is going to be able to understand it. So how do you make sort of simple things that the farmers can understand and adopt? And again, how do you scale it? That's the key. And our whole focus is not the widgets or anything. It's creating repeatable, scalable systems. That's the key. It's the how. There's so much focus on the why. We all know the why is we need to feed everybody, climate change, and the what is the technology. Yeah. But there's no emphasis on the how. So all of these projects that come in and they start off at 30,000 feet and all these declarations, they don't have any how. They're just the why and the what. And I think that needs to be the change. It's the how.
You definitely need to think about the long-term sustainability of any project that you're working on, because we've seen where there's cases where you hold somebody's hand and they'll be with you. And there's an interesting case, but I won't mention names, but there's been a group of people that were implementing a social project. And once the funding was taken away, the people just stopped doing the project. So I think the sustainability of the project in the long term is very important. So I'm sure it fits in nicely with the way you have a plan on how you can make this project of yours sustainable and make it grow and move to different areas. So not just in Europe, but you looking at spreading throughout the world and especially Africa. And I think that would be the best case for the people on the ground producing the food.
Yeah, you made a good point. I mean, part of what we look at is, it's the right equipment, it's agroecologically, regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, natural inputs, so natural resource management, all of these aspects, practical education for farmers, value addition. But all of this is basically underpinned with community empowerment or community development and systems thinking. So you have to bring the community into the process. So part of what we will be doing is bringing farmers to come and see our demo farm, then working with them so it becomes their project. And it's not this outside agency that comes in and holds their hand. It has to be, you have to build capacity so that it becomes their project. Basically, it's co-creation is the key. Yeah. And everybody has to do what they're good at. So our job basically is to be change agents and create the system. Yeah. Okay. Then we're not going to implement it in different countries or in different areas. We're going to ideally open the first 3 hubs near Hawassa, but bring everything to Hawassa and change that sort of landscape, bring all the capacity, and make Hawassa like a Silicon Valley of Africa. Bring everything to one place and show what can be done and start building local capacity. And I said, we're not going to scale it. And the idea then is somebody wants to do it in Nigeria. They come to Ethiopia, we do training, we have like a business in a box for them, then we help them get set up and then they take it over themselves. So our role is to create the system, and then through franchising, like a McDonald's type of system, that's how we scale.
Wow, David, I think it's really good that you speak about that social aspect as well, because when you co-create something and you give people a sense of feeling, then they actually want to work towards doing what you want to do and what they want to do. Because I'm sure you've come across the top-down approach many times in life, and it never really works, or it doesn't work very often, especially when you're working with the people on the ground. They need to buy into your idea and contribute to your idea. So you have to get that balance right. You also can't just do a bottom-up approach, and you just can't go top-down. You have to get that perfect balance. And it sounds like you've got that correct in your organization. So I know that you spoke about mechanization, but are there any other tools that you're looking at? So maybe irrigation or any other aspects of farming that you are looking to add on to your enterprise at some stage?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about India. To me, India is where Africa should be looking towards. India has, as I said, scaled all of these technologies to similar types of farms. The average farm in India is 1 hectare. I was in Punjab a few weeks ago, and they can produce an average like 2.5 crops per hectare. And they get anywhere between 20 and 30 tons of rice, wheat, and beans basically per hectare. But they're actually been doing subsurface drip irrigation in India for the last 10 years. BISA, which is the Borlaug Institute of South Asia, has been doing, and it's affordable, and it's used for cereals. So because you're not ploughing the field, they can put the subsurface drip irrigation lines down into the field. And now you can provide basically, water to the crops. So when we had the people from Punjab to Hawassa, they were saying, look, water should not be a limiting factor. In Ethiopia, they grow one crop. It's all rain-fed. There's no irrigation. So they're saying water, they have everything in Ethiopia. Water should not be a limiting factor. So again, it's just the right technology and the right system. So there's low-cost subsurface drip irrigation from India that could then be tested and then scaled in Africa.
That's interesting. And is there any particular reason that you chose Ethiopia as the hub for your project?
My co-founder, Dr. Germa Mogas, is Ethiopian. So the reason we were starting Ethiopia, I had previously another company that we got funding from the Irish government, and what we're doing now has been in Ethiopia funded by the Irish government's African Agricultural Development Programme. So they gave us all the funding to set all of this up. And so 11 years ago, we got funding. It was actually just by chance. The previous company I had, there was a conference in University in Ireland, an African Ireland Economic Forum, and the Ethiopian Minister for Agriculture was in attendance, and they asked if any companies had any technologies that might be appropriate. We had a meeting. I traveled to Ethiopia in March 2013 and fell in love with the country, and that's why. So, and I'd worked with Dr. Mogas for 5 years, from 2013 to 2018, and then we actually then joined together to create this new company, Regerators, which then created the Farm Lab model. And Dr. Mogas he did his master's degree in the Netherlands, so he's lived in Europe. He did his PhD in Ireland. He's traveled all over the world for different projects, and so he's seen outside, and he's seen he's been involved in projects in Ethiopia. And together it was like, look, it's the ecosystem is the challenge. There's so many projects that fail. They look at the why and the what. They don't look at the how, and they fail basically. And he said, I've been on so many projects. They work at the research gate, but we can never get them to the end farmer basically. So it's like, how do we bridge that gap from the research to the end farmer? So that's where we came up with the idea for Farm Lab Africa.
Yeah, that's an amazing idea. And, I think we just got straight into the business and your idea, but your knowledge of agriculture is definitely evident as well. So can you please just give us a little bit of insight or background about yourself? Because I know the SAI audience is quite young, and young people do listen to the podcast. So maybe could you please tell us how you started out and how you got this passionate about agriculture coming from a business background?
Yeah, I'm not from a farming background whatsoever. I'm 50 now, 51. The first time I set foot on a farm was like 40, when I was 40, so 11 years ago. I'm from Dublin, a city. I grew up in an urban area. I'm a manufacturing engineer by background, so I used to design packaging equipment. I was a production manager for Henkel, a German company that made super glue. Yeah. I ran a factory of 200 people for many years. And then just by happened to get into business consultancy, I did an MBA, and I left Henkel to open my own consultancy company. And then just by chance, one of the companies I was helping was an American farmer who developed this technology. And I said to him, look, you need to scale it and launch it. So he said, why don't you do it with me? So we did, and it was called Magro. It's now in, I think, like 10 countries around the world. We have a team of 30 people. I left Magro in 2001 to start this new company. And that was it. I literally started this ag tech business 11 years ago in a small office in university in Ireland called University College Dublin. Started to develop the technology. So we developed a backpack sprayer for smallholder farmers. Again, it was funded by the Irish government. But while it worked at the research field, again, we couldn't scale it. And that's the challenge. And so we had to pull out of Ethiopia. At the time, it was 2018. And I started working in different countries. So I was in USA, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, all over Europe. And that's when I started coming across regenerative agriculture and the benefits. And I seen the benefits and started listening to podcasts like this. And I came across the FAO had this incredible, if any agriculture engineers, it's called SAMA, Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization for Africa. It was published by the FAO. And they basically did a 5-year survey, and they created this incredible document. explaining about mechanization and how it can be scaled across Africa. But they don't implement it. They create a framework and then they leave it up to other people to implement it. So that was the first point. And then FAO also had Save and Grow, which is all about regenerative agriculture and agroecology and how this is the future for Africa. So again, another incredible document that shows the way forward. But again, nobody's implementing it. So we developed our whole system. It's not us. We just taken SAMA and Save and Grow, and we just created a business around it, basically. And we're just trying to implement what other people have already written, basically, is the way forward. So any engineers out there, you read FAO, Save and Grow, and FAO, Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization for Africa. And it's a blueprint as to how Africa can scale mechanization.
That's really motivating to hear, David. And it's good to see how you drew the links and you saw that there's a need for taking research outputs and getting them into practice. And that I think there's a lot of people in research that are guilty of doing your project, publishing, and then you move on to the next. But your research stays on a shelf in a way, and you don't think about implementation and making an impact with the work that you've done. So it's really great that you're taking the work that's out there and putting it out into practice for the people to see the impact of the research that has been done already.
So I think a lot of researchers don't think of business. They don't think beyond. They don't think about adoption or scaling. They just, I'll do the research and then somebody else will then take over from me. I think that's a key challenge, basically, is how do we join all the dots? And you shouldn't start something unless it's going to get to how do you get it to the end farmer, basically, the end village? That should be the whole, focus, is how do we scale these things, basically? And that should be the focus. And maybe because I'm not from a traditional agricultural background, I come at it with a different mindset. I come at it more from a systems thinking perspective. And it's like, okay, why not change how things are done? I've traveled, I've sprayed all different crops all over the world. I've seen agriculture all over the world. So I come at it from a different mindset. And it's like, why can't, if you look, I've been on commercial farms in Africa that can produce, $20,000, $30,000 worth of produce per hectare, right? Because they have all of the things that they need to do it. And yet a smallholder farmer, maybe it's like $500 or $1,000 per hectare. So the soil and can produce and it can create that amount. But, right now it's the system it's sort of incremental change. And we're saying, well, why not, bridge that gap and actually change the complete system? That's why we want to do agroecology with the whole system and not just grow wheat and maize in a monoculture, but add in all different crops, high value crops that they can then do value addition for and then export them around the world, basically. Africa can become the breadbasket or the food source for the world, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got the resources because we've got the right climate, we've got the space, and that's the most important thing. It's like what you said, Ethiopia does have the perfect model for your business. And, I think it could be a very good model for other agricultural engineers to see what you've done and how you've brought a different way of thinking into agricultural engineering. And that's the really great part about it. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this will definitely be inspired by you and what you're doing in Ethiopia. And, there are lots of different levels of smallholder farmers in South Africa and Africa. And if they can get to hear this, it will definitely inspire change in them. So it's been really great speaking to you about that. And I just have another question just around agricultural engineers. So I'm sure in the past 10 years or so, you must have met some really interesting agricultural engineers from diverse backgrounds. So I'd just like to get your thoughts on this or on agricultural engineers. And if you've got any interesting anecdotes from agricultural engineers that you've met throughout the world.
Yeah, we were talking about it previously, and if you take particularly lots of rural areas and you go to USA, Canada, there might be a farm could be a long distance away from somewhere else, so they have to basically do all of the different tasks. They can't become and say, well, I'm only doing this role, or they have to be that jack of all trades and have to do all the things that need to be done, for example, to keep their farm going or to maintain everything. So that really showed me that agricultural engineering and farmers have that in their tool set, people to do all the things that they need to do, to be successful, basically. So I think that's a key part is how to, and then we were talking earlier at the conference, in terms of policymakers. And I think the key thing for the ag engineering profession is is to get policymakers to start thinking about the how. So you can make all these declarations about we're going to increase fertilizer rate basically across Africa from whatever it is 30 kilos per hectare to 150. How are you going to do it? Yeah. Don't make a declaration unless you've thought through the how basically. And again, it goes back to this challenge of, you said the bottom up and the top down approach. You need to intertwine the two. Yeah. If you're on the ground and you don't understand what other challenges are there and what opportunities are there, you'll only make incremental changes in anything. If you're at the top and you don't understand the bottom, then you'll make these lofty aspirations that aren't feasible. And you need to have a balance of the two working together.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. And I think that's also what's needed. You have to get that balance right. And like you said, you also need to think a bit more holistically. And, agricultural engineers in general do have a lot of skills, and everyone describes agricultural engineers as the jack of all trades. And it's really good, for example, like looking at you, you've linked all of these different aspects together, and that's great for the industry. And then it's also very interesting that you're getting yourself into Africa, because I'm sure you've heard this many times that African problems require unique solutions, because sometimes there's these unique challenges in Africa that can't be solved with different ways of thinking that are not born in Africa in a way. So yeah, I'm sure you would have experienced that in Ethiopia. So sometimes it's not as easy to come up with a theoretical solution and implement it in Africa. On paper, your idea may look really good and your numbers may match up and everything may look perfect. But when you actually get on the ground, there could be a really big curveball and you wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, you have to have patience. Yeah. And you have to look beyond the day-to-day challenges, and there will always be lots of challenges. And when we're building the prototype of a backpack sprayer, and I had funds, I had money. I couldn't get the things that I could easily buy in Ireland in a hardware store, and I can get in basically a matter of minutes or hours. It would take me days to source, or it wouldn't be the right part, and these are all the challenges that we overcome. So you have to be patient, but at the same time, you can still want a desire to change the system, but be patient in how you do it basically. And so this is our whole system. It's going to take us 3-4 years of developing this model. Our goal is to open 3 hubs near Hawassa. We have to be patient. We have to develop the system. We have to develop the local knowledge in terms of we're moving to regenerative agriculture. You've got growing seasons. You can't sort of fast track the process. You have to, grow. You've got to try different things, brought it to the system. We've got to build that local capacity. That's not going to change overnight. It's, we had great success with our team working with the Indian guys that came over and the Italians that they've embraced the different technologies, but they have to learn. They have to do it themselves. Our local team in Ethiopia has to do everything themselves. They have to make mistakes. You learn by doing. It's the only way. It's practical, basically. So you have where you want to get to. So we want to get from A to Z. There's going to be lots of twists and turns along the way, and you have to have patience to get there. But you have to keep an eye on this is the prize. So the prize is changing the system and scaling this across Africa. But again, that's a long term. So our goal is 4 years of just taking the system, learning, proving that it works. Your point about proving that it works for the smallholder farmer. What does it cost for them? Do they make profit? All of these things. Where are they now? What's the improvement in their soil health year by year? All of these things have to be documented and tested, and all the assumptions ironed out. Basically, it has to be this co-creation with them, and we have to iron out all of the training issues, everything before you scale it. So you can't scale problems. You have to make sure that it's all working before you give it to somebody else in a different region through a franchise. Again, my son at home listens to me talking all the time about McDonald's and all of these. McDonald's is a franchise system. It's a proven business model that's scaled around the world. They didn't scale overnight. It took them, opened the first restaurants, they developed the system, and then they scaled. So you need patience for the first few years, and then you can hit the accelerator pedal then when it's proven. So our biggest challenge will be people wanting the system now. We get quick wins and they want it now. And we have to hold the reins and say, no, this is going to take us 3 or 4 years, and basically keeping it in a controlled system for the next few years. We actually don't want people to know about us in a certain way, because otherwise it'll pull us in the wrong direction. And even my co-founder is like, well, we can sell what we're doing. Or no, we have to. The prize is the repeatable, scalable system, the franchise model. Yeah. Revenue in the short term, well, it's good, is not the long term prize. Basically, it's the system. So that's the challenge of it's a 4-year project, and we will have hurdles along the way, and we need to be patient and build local capacity, and then from that local capacity, then we can start to, adopt it across Ethiopia and other countries. And then the beauty of being on the university campus, they have land, is people from different countries can come to Ethiopia. They can see everything firsthand. Again, seeing is believing. They see that it's working. We train them. Then they go to their own country. We help them establish in their country, and then it goes from there. But it's step by step.
Yeah. So I know you said at this point you don't want a lot of eyes on the project, and it's really good to hear, because you want it to be a perfect working model before you expand. But at this stage, is there any resources or anything online or way that people can follow you and get updates on what you do, or even just to reach out to you if they wanted to learn more about what you are doing?
Yes, we are going to start publishing a lot of the data that we have. We've captured pictures of all of the crops that we've been growing, and it's amazing. Each week the team shares, in our WhatsApp group, they share the weekly updates, and to see the crop growing is just incredible. What has been achieved with our team. We'll harvest in the next few weeks. We will publish that information on social media, and we'll tell people. But it's a balancing act. We start getting lots of people wanting to contact us, even here at the conference. People are interested in how do we partner. And that's the challenge. Is like, well, we need to focus. So we need to be really narrow and really deep. That's our, is that like what we're trying to do is change the system. We have to be focused. That it's, that's our goal basically. So it's stay in one place, develop the model, and then scale it. And then, I've been in agricultural conferences around the world, spoke to lots of funders. There is so much money available out there. The problem is there isn't a repeatable, scalable system in Africa, and all these projects fail. So people's perception, rightly or wrongly, is money goes into agricultural project in Africa and nothing comes out the far side. And we have to change that perspective, basically. And that's the whole idea of showing that you have a system that works, that the farmer benefits, that we're improving the soil health, that we're capturing carbon, that all of these things have to be documented. And then actually scaling it and getting finance to scale it will be the easier part of it once you've proven it. And again, going back to, if a young person wants to do this, right now, if they have an idea for a hub, there is no proven model. It's hard, basically. So you go to a bank and you say, I want to do this. How do you get the money, basically? Whereas if you went to a bank and said, I want to open a McDonald's, I have 1 million people here. We know that everybody wants to eat burgers. We know that it's an easier system because it's a proven model. So that's the idea, is we create the proven model. It comes easier to finance. And part of what we're trying to do is also bring that finances as well to the table. That we would bring the finance. We'd work with the funders and say, we will provide it to the local franchisee, and then they will, we'll set them up. We make sure that it works. And then over time, they will start to own the equipment themselves once they prove that the model works, basically. And if for some reason it didn't, we can take that equipment back or move it to somewhere else. So that's a key part of it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm sure in future we'll definitely be seeing more of this. And I definitely think that your idea has great potential in Africa. And like you said, you've adopted the idea from Asia. So the potential is limitless. But David, it's been really good chatting with you. And I'll definitely follow you for updates. And I'll keep a close eye on what you're doing. And I wish you all the success moving forward with your endeavors.
Thank you.
Okay, that's been a really interesting episode with David, who's not an agricultural engineer, but he's making an impact in the field, and he's bringing mechanization, tractors, and implements to farmers in Africa. And I think it's a very interesting business model which could work. And I'm keen to see how David scales it up. But with that being said, that's not the last of the SAI podcast. Please keep your eye open for the next episode, and we'll definitely have another interesting guest on here. And don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Thank you.